What's up, guys? I think we are live now. Let's have a look here. All right, yeah, I'm just going to be doing some reacts here. Going to be reacting to some Douglas Murray clips first. I thought I might as well do these reactions while live streaming so you guys can be involved if you wish to be. Because I normally do these off the air, but why not? I'm just going to send out a quick invite here to our Discord server. If you guys aren't on our Discord server yet, consider joining us. We have conversations going on all day, every day. It's a lot of fun, very, very chill. But yeah, we'll see how this works out. All right, let's get to some stuff here.
First of all, Prime Minister Netanyahu, thanks so much for joining me.
That's my pleasure.
Can we start at the very beginning? On October the 7th, Israel suffered what you've described as perhaps the worst day in its history. Attacks by thousands of terrorists from the south. One of the things that struck me, speaking to families and others here, is the number of them who said things like, said to their children, "Don't worry, the IDF will be here in minutes." What went wrong that day?
Quite a few things, and we'll examine it when the war's over. But I described it actually as the worst violence, the worst savagery perpetrated against Jewish people since the Holocaust. The difference between what these savages did to us and what the Nazis did to us is not very big. They basically wanted to annihilate every Jew. That's the Hamas charter calls for the murder of every Jew on earth, and certainly of the Jewish state. The difference was not in intent, the difference was in capability.
Yeah, what up, old Joe? Yeah, we'll be bringing more events to Vancouver for sure. I want to bring. I've been thinking about doing a big God debate of some kind. It's been a while since we've done something on God in Vancouver specifically, so definitely something in the future there. Do you have any suggestions? What would you like to see? Say hello when you guys get into the chat. This is just a very casual stream. I'm going to be doing some reactions. This is just the content creation process for YouTube shorts and shorter clips. So feel free to just come and go and say hello. Drop a like if you're feeling generous, but welcome to Pangburn. For those of you who don't know what Pangburn is a brand that is governed by the laws of good faith and helpfulness. So in everything we do, we try to bring good faith. So sincerity of intentions is what I mean by good faith, and helpfulness. And I think most of you should know what helpfulness looks like and what unhelpfulness looks like. And when we're talking about the dialectic, the conversation, discussions, think about what helpfulness looks like in conversations. Are you trying to trip up your interlocutor, or are you trying to gain an ease of access to how they truly feel or what they truly think about any particular topic? So those are the principles that guide Pangburn. Pangburn is not we're not trying to push any kind of political agenda. It's just exposing more of the world to the magic of good intellectual discourse, and that's what Penguin's been about. And we've had this channel for about 7 years now, and the growth has been fantastic. And I want to thank you all for your support and for being here. We have a lot. I have so many events planned for the future. I've basically pre-spent all of the YouTube revenue for years to come on new events for the channel. So make sure you are subscribed so you don't miss any new events that get dropped. Our next big event, of course, is Dinesh D'Souza coming back for his second Pangburn event, and he's going to be taking on Alex O'Connor. The artist formerly known as Cosmic Skeptic. I think he's still Cosmic Skeptic on YouTube. But yeah, Alex has gained quite a following. And of course, Dinesh is kind of the prince of the evangelical, the staunch Christian community in the United States, and kind of a right-hand man of Donald Trump. So it'll be very interesting. And I like working with Dinesh when it comes to the dialectic. I find him to be good faith and helpful. And, that's ultimately what I'm trying to promote. But yeah, let me know what your guys' predictions are for Alex O'Connor versus Dinesh D'Souza. That will be very interesting. The topic is the Bible true? So we're obviously going to get into different criterias of truth. For those of you who are not well read in philosophy, one of the first things I point people to is try to gain an understanding of what your criteria of truth is. Now, most of you are going to come to realize that you're operating under a custom criteria of truth, which means you're relying on some correspondence, some coherence, some tradition, to encapsulate what you feel is true. And ultimately, all of this is coming from your feelings. All of it's coming from your sentiments. And a lot of people want to believe that when it comes to their what they believe to be true, that they've escaped their feelings or something like that. But that's just not the case. Like the only difference between you who is not a Christian and the person who is a Christian is that you did not feel convinced by the claims of Christianity. We have to recognize that all of this is coming from your feelings when we boil it all down. But that doesn't mean we can't try to be better with truth with regards to serving our purposes. So if our purposes are to become technologically advanced, for example, you're going to want to rely on a correspondence criteria of truth. That's what science uses. The claims we make about reality and how those claims interact with what the objects are actually doing out there. So look into the different criterias of truth out there. There are traditional criterias of truth where you rely on tradition, where it's maybe it's your traditional book, like the Bible or something like that, and you're going to get a lot of truth from there, and that would be a traditional approach to your epistemological standards of truth. So nailing down what your epistemology is going to be very important when trying to refine your thinking. So let's a lot of people are saying Alex O'Connor is going to just smoke Dinesh. But we got to remember that Dinesh D'Souza is no slouch, right? He's been up against, Christopher Hitchens, Sam Harris, all of these people he's gone up against. And if you look at his last conversation with Matt Dillahunty, if you look at the comment section, there's a lot of people showing a fair amount of support for Dinesh D'Souza when it comes to the hot topic political issues of the day, to climate change, to issues of trans issues, who should be using which bathroom. And, Dinesh scored quite a few points in that discussion with a lot of people in the comment section. It'll be interesting how much Alex and Dinesh stay on the Bible and how much is going to be abstracted from that and grafted onto a different political issue of the age. It'll be very interesting. This will be in New York City, by the way. We'll be going back to Lehman College, which was actually a great place to do an event. We were just there with Lawrence Krauss and Nick Pope. It was a lot of fun. So there's a little update for you guys. And also make sure you join us on Sundays for our weekly shows, the Pangburn Update. We will be doing giveaways every Sunday. We only have 4 episodes. We've already given away $1,000. And we're going to continue giving away cash and ebooks and all kinds of stuff. So tickets. I want to do like an all expenses paid trip to a Pangburn event for someone, I thought that would be a cool prize. So keep an eye out for that. But let's react to Douglas Murray talking to Netanyahu here with regards to what's going on in Gaza.
In the death camps of the Nazis, they murdered thousands of Jews each day, and we could do nothing. Here they murdered 1,200 innocent people, and the next day, even though we had these failings on that day, which will be examined, we rolled them back. And now we're going after these Hamas monsters in Gaza. That's the difference that Israel has made. We now have the capacity to defend ourselves, and even if we have failings, which we did, we can defend ourselves by fighting back. Something.
Yeah, that's going to be one of the big questions. It'll be interesting to see how, what comes out with regards to how easy it seemed for this tragedy to occur, for terrorists to enter Israel and carry out a massacre like this, with the response times seeming to be lacking. I think that's going to be a big question, and if there's going to be a two-state solution or whatever ends up happening, they need to be better there, of course.
The Jewish people couldn't do in the Holocaust.
I know there will be an inquiry to come, but do you have a sense already of, there's so many people in this country saying that the tech failed, that the IDF didn't get there in time, all sorts of things just seem to have gone wrong.
Yes, quite a few. And yes, I have an idea, but I think it's premature to talk about it. Operationally, we've reached quite a few conclusions, and we're putting them into effect. But remember, this war is ongoing. We're in its fourth month. It took the...
I'm interested to know what you guys think of Netanyahu, by the way. Do you think he is a force for good for Israel generally? Is he a noble man? I hear a lot of people say things like, "Oh, he's a fraud," or "He's a shyster" to some degree, or "He's received money from this or that or the other." And it's a lot of the same things I hear when people talk about like Joe Biden or the Clintons or Trump. People get into the start laying out how this person is evil or bad or whatever. So I'd like to know what your guys' opinion is on Netanyahu. When I ask people their opinion on him, some will be like he's a right wing propagandist who only cares about money or like things like that, and then but I won't get much substance out of that. Like some people say like his wife's a fraud or something like that, and I'm like, well, I mean, let's talk about him. Okay, maybe his wife is a fraud or committed fraud. I don't, like if someone gets caught committing fraud, there's this thing where it's actually in the musical Les Miserables. There's this issue of like Jean Valjean steals a loaf of bread to feed his family or his child, and the attitude from the chief of police is that once a thief, always a thief attitude, right? So that's another thing I'd like to ask you guys is, what do you think of this? If a person commits fraud, like let's say Netanyahu's wife embezzled money, I believe that's the claim. Do you think that label ought stick for life? Like should she always be a fraud? Like people with like Sam Harris, for example. Sam Harris said some stuff about Joe Biden's laptop that everyone always cites. They're like, since he said that, he has lost all credibility. Is that all credibility for life? Or is that just for an arbitrary amount of time, and then eventually you're going to start listening to Sam Harris, lay out some strong arguments again? It just seems really weird. I don't know. It just seems to be so general how people deal with that. So Ibrid says, well, if you write a foundation for advocating critical thinking associated with the golden rule and expand from there, you wouldn't have to rely on a slew of Parables. Oh, okay. You guys are talking about Dinesh. Okay, interesting. Let's keep going with the clip here. Oops, I opened one of my many other windows. There we go.
U.S. and its allies 9 months to vanquish ISIS to vanquish the radical Islamic forces in Mosul. Mosul is smaller than Gaza, didn't have this vast terror underground infrastructure, had fewer fighters. So we're on course, but it's going to take some time.
Yeah, this is something no one wants to hear, right? That this takes time, and Netanyahu just gave an example of bigger forces, greater military might in an area that's smaller and that isn't really trenched in like a beehive, like a terrorist beehive. This stuff takes time, and no one wants it to take time. Everyone wants it to be done, and that's just not the reality of how these things work. And that's something I've noticed is a lot of people looking at it's so easy to sit back and look at a number of like, oh my god, kids have died, you failed. No, that actually it doesn't mean you failed if kids have died. It doesn't mean your military operation has failed if innocent children have died. And that seems counterintuitive to say and think, but that's just the reality of war. So, and people need to, when you're getting into a very technical field, fallibilism is, of course, the most important game in town. You need to go about this fallibilistically like you literally know nothing, because almost all of you know absolutely nothing, including me, know absolutely nothing about the details of that operation. So just remind yourself of that. You know absolutely nothing about the details of that operation. You don't, I don't, almost everyone doesn't know the details of that operation. So before you say things like this is a failure, that's a failure, oh, I could do that better, like just remember that you know nothing about this, for the most part. um you guys, we have 20 in the room right now. If you could all just take a minute to drop a like on the video, that would be awesome. I'm going to be chilling, making some content here for a while, so I'm glad to have you with me, and feel free to say hello in the chat.
And in the meantime, yes, we have learned some lessons, which I don't think it's right for me to impart them here.
Now, you have a number of objectives in your war, stated objectives in your war against Hamas, but one of them is to defeat Hamas, and another is to negotiate to release the hostages. Aren't these things mutually incompatible?
No, because if they both share one thing: you need military pressure. The only thing that gets Hamas to release the hostages is military pressure. That's why we've already released roughly half of them. And I think that's a major achievement. And we intend to release a lot of them. I think that
Yeah, can you imagine these people who go around shouting "Free Palestine" and they haven't once said "Release the hostages"? That really makes me sick, to be honest. Like, I don't know how you guys feel about that, but the attitude, the general attitude of the world right now should be release the damn hostages, release them, release release the innocent people who literally have nothing to do with the cause. Now, some people will say, "Oh no, they have everything to do with it because they are a valuable asset to the Palestinian cause." Well, once you start talking about human beings' livelihood as assets like that, you're already morally bankrupt. You've already lost the moral quiz. You need to go back to the drawing board. You need to land on a moral foundation that at least has you maximizing well-being for yourself and those around you. That should be your categorical imperative.
the only way that you're going to achieve that and to achieve the victory over Hamas is by applying military pressure, and that's what we're doing. I won't get into the question of how we're going to complete it because we're thinking about that too. But it's a fact that until we applied military pressure, we couldn't get anyone. We had people held up in Hamas's hands for years, and we couldn't get them out. But once we start applying military pressure, all of a sudden we can get them out.
Now, the US and others of your allies want you to wrap up the war in Gaza as soon as possible. But everyone you speak to here believes, rightly, I think, that it's going to be months of war to come. How do you reconcile those two things, keeping your allies happy, but doing what you feel you need to do in Gaza?
We have to win in Gaza. We have to achieve total victory. Hamas cannot be left standing, coming out of the ruins with a V sign and saying, we'll do it again and again and again, which they promised to do.
Yeah, I agree
So
with
first, for our own sake, for our own future.
I agree with Netanyahu. Like the goal should be total victory, right, against terrorists. That should not be a confrontational statement. I think. Zane says, I may be a minority in this chat, we'll see, but Queers for Palestine is a laughable group of people. Yeah, I mean, these are people that don't understand that the militant Islamists want to bash the heads in of so-called queers. So, and they need to understand that Palestine is unfortunately a heavily indoctrinated zone from a Islamic perspective. So, it is an absolute ridiculous idea. Instead of holding signs saying "release the hostages," queers support hostages. Where are the queer support hostages signs? Maybe there's some, but across the media all around the world, you see, queers for Palestine, because I think we tend to prop up the ridiculous things that seem to be catching fire in the public square. But yeah, I agree that calling them a laughable group of people, I just think they're very misled, and I either morally bankrupt on this issue or don't understand the issue at all. Some people see this issue through like a racial lens purely, and they'll be like, oh, this is just people who seem white to be killing people who seem brown. Like it's just very, very low resolution thinking. So people should try yes, we're all going to have emotional knee-jerk reactions to when things happen around the world, but after that we should be able to call upon some reasoning faculties that start painting a picture of like, oh, okay, there was there was no terrorist attack, and then there was one, and they raped, murdered, took hostages, over 1,000 people, and that happened, and what should a state be allowed to do in response to that, and what should they be able to do in an attempt to get those hostages back. And I think in general, it's a good attitude to not negotiate with terrorists. There's a reason why that is the general attitude of the planet, to not negotiate with terrorists, because it sets a horrible precedent. Make sure you guys drop a like when you get into the room. Welcome to Pangburn if you're new.
We have to defeat these monsters. Secondly, I don't think it's just our case. It's also the case.
Yeah, and calling them monsters, like I think in the colloquial sense of what a monster is, like we would call Jeffrey Dahmer a monster, we would call other terrorists and murderers monsters. Like I don't hate the label of monster on terrorists who do this type of thing. But if I was in Netanyahu's position, I would say yes. I would continue to reiterate that these monsters are holding not just the Israeli hostages, Israeli people hostage, but the Palestinian people who are just basically following the lead of Hamas for fear of their own lives, or with no way to escape. So I would always be reiterating that point when I'm speaking to the world, if I was the leader. I understand that his main core constituency probably doesn't like hearing that, because they might say, well, the real problem is the fucking terrorists who are, kidnapping people and murdering people. That's the problem. That's not even close. We don't even have to mention the other thing, the Islamic indoctrination that goes on. But yeah.
As I've told President Biden, I've told all the leaders who came here, I said, this is your war as well, because this is not merely a minor skirmish. This is part of a major confrontation between the moderate axis of Israel and the moderate Arab states against Iran, the terror axis of Iran, who is the three H's: Houthis, Hezbollah, Hamas, and others. And the whole world is now watching. Who's going to win? They're sitting in the bleachers. Who will win? Will Iran win or will Israel win? Will they win or will the West win? So I think that what I say to our American friends, whose help I appreciate a great deal, I said, the war will take as long as it takes, but it will result in total victory, because our battle is your battle and our victory is your victory as well.
Let me come on to some of the international aspects of that. The day after in Gaza,
how about Douglas Murray? Hey, blowing up finally. Douglas Murray, he was one of my most favorite people to do events with, to have a drink with after the event, to joke around with backstage. He's just a very kind, honest person. And unfortunately, I've not always worked with kind, honest people, but Douglas is it just gets a gold medal from me in that regard. Um, Meanwhile, there will be some people like, clinking glasses, saying weird things, basically about how much money they've made from their event, or their ideas of wanting to become some kind of billionaire or whatever. And Douglas is just kicking back, telling jokes, and just making everyone around him feel comfortable. Very, very nice individual to work with. I wanted to say that, and I'm very happy to see that Douglas is becoming as popular as he is. He's being touted as the defender of Western values, of the Enlightenment values, and I think that's really cool. I love that Douglas, isn't afraid to say that he's an atheist. He isn't afraid to share that, although he is an atheist, that he still finds some value in going to church. I think that's cool. There's nothing wrong with that. Matt Dillahunty finds himself going to church sometimes as well. I've heard him talk about that too. So it's not. I don't think it's as rare as people think for atheists to still go to church once in a while. And one of the reasons why Douglas Murray says that he does this is just like, to remind him about the culture from which he came. And as he did grow up a Catholic. What else about Douglas? Yeah, and of course him being a gay man, and for a lot of people, they would think that he is conservative, but I think they think that because he's so outspoken against Islam and against like radical upswells of religion. And I I don't know. I mean, if I was to rate where Douglas Murray lands, I mean, sure, on issues of immigration, he's going to be more conservative about that issue. He's okay with, he's okay with women seeking an abortion, so he's very much kind of a centrist, like I am. Like I just focus on the issues, and I don't wave red or blue flags, or I don't get caught up in any of that. And I appreciate that about Douglas. And I'm sure there are things that him and I disagree on, but as someone who really appreciates seeing good faith, helpful discourse, I really appreciate Douglas. Now, sometimes, here's a critique for Douglas. Sometimes he falls into that name calling bullshit that shows like Piers Morgan seem to present on frequent occasion, but which he doesn't need to do that. He'd be much stronger dialectically if he didn't need to fall into any kind of name calling. But maybe that's the entertainment element that I just am in a very unpopular corner of things that wants to see that eliminated. But
For instance, there's talk about the fact that, of course, Gaza's schools need reform, the educational, they have to stop teaching hate and much more. But there are international organizations that were meant to be ensuring that for a decade and a half now, and clearly they didn't. Who on earth is meant to be in charge of Gaza after this is over?
Well, one thing is clear. It shouldn't be UNRWA, because UNRWA, the United Nations special agency that was set up for the Palestinians, in fact, perpetuates the Palestinian refugee status, because otherwise that's their bread and butter. But far worse than that, we discovered that there were 13 UNRWA workers who actually participated either directly or indirectly in the October 7th massacre. UNRWA is perforated with Hamas, and UNRWA is, in UNRWA schools, they've been teaching the doctrines of extermination for Israel, the doctrines of terrorism, lauding terrorists, glorifying terrorists. So obviously that has to change. We need in Gaza not only a full victory against Hamas and demilitarization, sustained demilitarization that can only be handled by Israel. If you have another international force that can fight the resurgence of terrorism, let me know. And the third is we need a force there for internal management that does not educate the children of Gaza, to become terrorists, does not fund terrorists, and does not dispatch terrorists. Doesn't teach the annihilation of Israel. That's what we need.
I mean, I agree with everything Netanyahu just said there. There needs to be much better oversight. And Douglas Murray brought up, there have been organizations that were meant to be doing this. They were supposed to be doing this. For everyone that wonders, like, why hasn't this been happening? Well, it was supposed to be, but obviously the oversight. This is another issue: the oversight, the preparedness on behalf of Israel. These are things that need to be updated and scrutinized and looked at in order to offer greater protections against terrorism.
I can tell you how the first thing and the second thing will be done. We're working on the third. De-radicalization takes time and takes commitment.
What international allies do you have to help ensure that happens?
Well, I hope that any fair-minded government, any government that can withstand for 5 minutes or even several months the force of anti-Israel propaganda, will understand that their future is intertwined with ours. Because if barbarism wins here, Europe will be next. America will be next. Iran will emerge victorious. Iran will...
Not necessarily, right? Not necessarily. This is where I disagree with him here. This is a bit of fear-mongering, but it's not necessarily absolutely incorrect or anything like that. But this is one of those things that people say, like, when they start saying, like, but if this happens, then that, then this, then that, and the other. It's actually fallacious. So the answer is not necessarily. It's something to think about, but I would need to see more about, like, what the likelihood of all this happening, of Iran, coming for greater chunks of Europe, or to have more influence in Israel. Who, and of course he knows better than I do about the details, but whatever those details are, it doesn't mean that that's necessarily going to be the response, right? So just a small quibble there.
Unchallenged will conquer the Middle East. Iran will develop unchallenged nuclear weapons. It will have ballistic missiles to threaten Europe and the United States. This is part of a larger battle. and everyone has a stake in Israel's winning. Can governments go beyond the?
I mean, it's a good sales pitch, right? That's what this is. It's intriguing, it's enticing. When he says like they will develop unchallenged these weapons of mass destruction unchallenged, that's not true. Of course, that will be challenged diplomatically or militaristically, right? So again, but he's putting his best pitch out there for the world.
Immediate pressures that that are leveled at them.
The pressures of thousands of people on the street.
Yes, thousands of people on the street. Let me tell you, and I think in America, the great majority of people support Israel. They understand instinctively that Israel is fighting their battle. They understand instinctively what the terrorists, the radical Islamists say. They say, we're the small Satan, America is the great Satan. You Europeans, I don't want you to be offended, but you're a middle-sized Satan.
Okay? A middling Satan.
A middling Satan, okay? But for them, this is all one big battle of civilization, our civilization against their wanton aggression, their violence, their rejection of all the values that we hold dear, the ideas of liberty, of choice, of freedom, the rights of women, the rights of minorities, the rights of gays. All of that they want to sweep away. And the question is, do we stand or do we fall? We stand. We're committed to doing it. We have no choice. I think deep down in their hearts, all the leaders that I talk to, you know what they say to me? I'll say not all, okay? Nearly all, okay? That allows everyone to be the exception if they don't want to admit what they actually said to me. They say, we know you have to crush Hamas. We know that you have a just cause, but we're having problems with public opinion. So please help us out. Well, we're doing everything in our power to minimize civilian casualties against an enemy, Hamas, that is perpetrating a double war crime. They not only target our civilians, murder our civilians, rape women and behead them, burn babies alive. They not only target civilians, they hide behind civilians, their own civilians. That's a double war crime. And we're fighting this very difficult war, not to give immunity to the terrorists because they hide among civilians, calling on the civilians to leave, sending them leaflets, calling them on their phones, telling them to leave. Many of them do leave, even though Hamas is trying to prevent them at gunpoint and with gunfire.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that, based on a lot of well-learned, respected military opinions, Israel is doing more than anyone's ever done to warn civilians of bombs incoming. I'm going to pull up, let me just open up my Discord here. This is something Don and I were speaking about. Don's one of the co-hosts on our Sunday show. Let's see. Where is it? Yeah, this was by John Spencer. And John Spencer is an award-winning scholar, professor, author, combat veteran, national security military analyst, and internationally recognized expert and advisor on urban warfare, military strategy, tactics, and other related topics. Considered one of the world's leading experts on urban warfare, he served as an advisor to the top 4-star general and other senior leaders in the U.S. Army as part of strategic research groups from the Pentagon to the United States Military Academy. And this is his take on the how things have been going. In my opinion, Israel has implemented more measures to prevent civilian casualties in urban warfare than any other military in the history of war. This includes many measures the U.S. has or has not taken in wars and battles, but also many measures no military in the world has ever taken. Precautions during the initial air campaign to target enemy military capabilities, to include using precision-guided munitions and strict targeting protocols in both pre-planned and dynamic strikes against only military targets. Use of precision-guided munitions, PCMs, Despite the ignorance of reporting on ratios of PCMs to non-PCMs, Israel has used many types of PCMs to include lower collateral damage munitions, smaller diameter bombs, and technologies and tactics that increase the accuracy of non-PCMs, dive bombing, limit civilian casualties, satellite imagery, AI, cell phone presence, etc. The idea that a military must use more PCMs versus non-PCMs in a war is a myth. In the first Gulf War, the US fired 250,000 individual bombs and missiles in just 43 days. A small fraction of those would fit the definition of PCMs. Also, myths about a choice of munitions and proportionality assessment value of target collateral damage estimate, such as saying a 500-pound bomb would achieve the same military task of a 2,000-pound bomb, with no mention of tunnels that would require greater penetration or availability of quantity of munitions. Call text ahead of strike, with at times roof knocking, no military has ever implemented in war. In some cases, IDF will call text drop small munitions on the roof of a building. While limited in the context of the strike, it has been used in this war. They're providing warning and evacuate urban areas, cities, before the full combined air and ground attack begins. While the tactic does alert the enemy defender and provide them the military advantage to prepare further, it is one of the best ways to prevent civilian casualties. I want to read that one more time. Providing warning and evacuate urban areas, cities, before the full combined air and ground attack begins. This is an important part. While the tactic does alert the enemy defender and provide them the military advantage to prepare further, it is one of the best ways to prevent civilian casualties. The U.S. did not do this in the invasion of Iraq or attack of Baghdad in 2003, did not do this in the 2004 First Battle of Fallujah, but did this in the Second Battle of Fallujah 6 months later because of the different context. In the 2016-2017 Battle of Mosul, the Iraq government told the civilian to not evacuate and shelter in place during the battle for both eastern and western Mosul, but later changed instructions further into the battle. Israel provided days and then weeks of warnings and time for civilians to evacuate multiple cities in northern Gaza before starting the main air-ground attack of urban areas. Use of airdrop flyers to give instructions on evacuations and establishing evacuation corridors. The U.S. implemented in Second Fallujah and assisted 2016 to 2017 Mosul. Israel dropped over 520,000 pamphlets broadcasted over radio and through social media messages to provide instruction for civilians to leave combat areas using corridors. Use of real phone calls, 19,734 to civilians in the combat areas. SMS texts, 64,000, and pre-recorded calls, almost 6 million, to civilians to provide instructions on evacuations. No military has ever done this in urban warfare history. Daily pauses for civilian evacuations. Israel conducted daily 4-hour pauses over multiple consecutive days, while pauses for civilians evacuations after a war or battle have started is not completely new, but the frequency and predictability used in Gaza may have been historic. The distribution of Israel military maps and urban warfare graphic, GRC, gridded reference graphic, to the civilians to assist with day-to-day evacuations, alerting civilians and enemy to where the IDF will be operating. No military in history has ever done this. So I wanted to read this. And again, for those of you who want to look more into this, this is John Spencer. And I'm going to give you guys the link to this in the chat. There you go. So there's some sound bites there that will be cutting into shorts because just too many people don't know about this, right? They don't know the lengths that Israel is and the IDF are going to mitigate, minimize civilian casualties. And there's a lot of propaganda out there that people are falling for that is trying to speak to the contrary, but of course leaving out important details. All right, let's watch some more here.
And Israel should be given the credit that it's fighting both a moral war and a necessary war. Most of the leaders that I talk to, they get it. But it's a question of whether they can withstand the pressures. We can. I hope they can too.
Well, let me move on to another border and perhaps another war. I was here in 2006 during the Hezbollah Second Lebanon War. That war eventually came to an end with Resolution 1701, the United Nations, which meant that Hezbollah was meant to not stockpile munitions to fire at Israel south of the Litani River. That hasn't been obeyed as far as I can see at all. I was up in the north again the other day, and you can see the Hezbollah bases. And I saw the footage of UN vehicles coming out of their base, Hezbollah firing rockets into Israel, and the UN vehicles just did a U-turn and went back, and that's the peacekeepers. Is war in the north inevitable?
It's up to Hezbollah, because we're not going to accept a situation where Hezbollah attacked us on October 8th, a day after the massacre, unprovoked. 100,000 of our citizens along the northern border left their homes. We cannot accept that they won't return. They have to return.
When can they return?
They'll return when Hezbollah's aggression stops and when Hezbollah forces are removed from the immediate vicinity of our border. That has to be arranged. Now, we can achieve that either with diplomatic means or with military means. If necessary, we'll do it with military means.
Diplomatic means have been tried, and they haven't worked, have they?
No, they haven't worked because I think Hezbollah overestimated their capacity, their military capacity, and underestimated our military capacity, and more importantly, our resolve. We've been exchanging blows, but our blows are very significant. You know, Douglas, 3.5 months ago, before this war began, we were debating, this is known, whether to remove a tent, a Hezbollah tent, right next to the border fence between Israel and Lebanon. Well, you know, we've gone a considerable distance beyond that. You follow all the things that we do in Lebanon against Hezbollah forces, against Hamas forces, hosted by Hezbollah in Beirut and elsewhere. We act, and we're absolutely determined to remove this threat from our northern border. Again, can be done, but it can be done peacefully, or it can be done militarily, and we're determined to achieve that.
Let's say you have to do it militarily, which seems to some of us to be the most likely outcome, let's say. What international support would you have for that, given the tense relationships the world seems to have with what you've already been doing in Gaza?
Look, we have to do, you know this statement, a man's got to do what a man's got to do?
I do.
Remember the days when you could actually say that? Well, today you'd say, a person has to do what a person has to do, okay? Well, let me extend that. A nation has to do what it has to do to survive. And if we have to take action both in the south and in the north that is understood by many to be a just action but they cannot stand the heat of public opinion, then we'll just have to do it alone. And we'll do what we need to do.
Word is, you don't have to confirm whether it's true or not, but word is that Secretary Blinken referred to that Israel didn't have credit for a much longer war in Gaza. How would America believe that you had enough credit, if that reported phrase is right, to begin a war or continue a war in Lebanon?
I think American public opinion and the American polity in general, not its extremes, especially on the ultra-progressives, But most of the Americans across the political divide understand that Israel is fighting a just war, that Hezbollah and the Houthis and Hamas are the bad guys, and Israel are the good guys. Admittedly criticized inordinately with I was going to say a double standard, but that's, I'd settle for a double standard. One standard for the dictatorships, one standard for the democracies. There's a triple standard here, a special standard reserved for a democracy called Israel. It's everybody, of the leaders that I speak to, they all understand that. But again, we'll do what we need to do. Israel will do what it needs to do to protect itself. I think that there is a larger element here because Hezbollah too is an integral part of the Iranian axis.
Well, I want to come on to that in a second, but before we do, can we just touch on Qatar quickly? You had enormous success in recent years with the Abraham Accords of countries in the region signing agreements, normalization agreements with Israel. But there's a number of countries that stand out, and perhaps most obvious is Qatar at the moment. Qatar hosts the leadership of Hamas, it funds Hamas, it also funds significant amounts of infrastructure, is invested in infrastructure in countries like Britain, in the United States, just been caught spying on a number of US senators.
Yeah, any organization, country, whoever that is supporting a terrorist group like Hamas needs to be dealt with. I'm sorry, that they just need to be dealt with. This can't be allowed. And I make no bones about that. There are people literally planning and spending billions of dollars on wanting to terrorize innocents, and that needs to be dealt with. And usually there is no diplomacy, there is no diplomatic effort that's going to work against terrorists in almost all cases. It needs to be handled militaristically. And that's another thing a lot of people don't want to hear, because they want to have this attitude that, oh, it's never right to take military action, or it's only, military actions only justified if no civilians are harmed during operations, which is just ridiculous. That's just never the case.
What should the West's attitude towards Qatar be? I think we should demand from Qatar that hosts Hamas leaders. They host Hamas leaders. They fund Hamas. They also operate Al Jazeera, which is just distorts the picture. Not in English, but in Arabic, it's a major source of incitement in the region. To use their leverage, and they have considerable leverage over Hamas, to achieve the release of the remainder of our hostages in the immediate time, to get the medicine that we put in there, that they promised that would reach our hostages.
But if Qatar does actually have the power to influence Hamas, what excuse is there for the hostages not having been released? Does Qatar have the influence or not? And if it does have the influence, why isn't it using it?
It has considerable influence, and I expect them to use it.
Are you confident they will?
No, but I expect them to do it.
And what are the repercussions if they don't?
Well, I think that the entire world is looking at Qatar, and they want to see if they use all the means at their disposal. They have significant means, and again, I expect them to do it, and I think other countries should as well.
What would, for instance, the United States be able to do about Qatar, or Great Britain, or other countries with?
That's something I'll speak to them directly about.
You'll speak to the leaders of Britain and America about that.
Mm-hmm. But I expect Qatar to live up to its promise to use its influence and achieve the release of the hostages and the delivery of the medicines right away.
It complains, of course, that it's an...
Again, that should be the main message here. Release the hostages, right? If you're someone out there who's been actively speaking about this and you've just been tunnel visioned on the plight of the Palestinians, and you haven't once uttered "release the hostages," but you have on many occasions uttered "free Palestine from the river to the sea," it's time to go back to the drawing board. it's time to reassess what is morally correct, probably even by your own standards. You know, release the hostages should be the message. And it should have been the message. I mean, soon after the terrorist attacks, people were in the streets showing their support for Palestine, and there was no attitude towards releasing hostages or anything like that. And I found it very disgusting. And I spoke to people who I found to have very disgusting ideas with regards to what's going on. And and I said right off the bat, when I saw this Twitter storm of ridiculousness and immorality, I really think a lot of people are going to be ashamed of what they wrote on Twitter, on the eve of these attacks. It's just, yeah, it's a shame. But this is why, uh, intellectual discourse, sorting this stuff out through the dialectic. This is how it's done. This is how I want to see war done. War of ideas, war of conversation, war of discussion. We can have our wars, but let's do them in the style of debate, in the style of the true good faith, helpful dialectic. I see the world trending that direction, but we have these upswells sometimes, these blips on the radar when the immoral, disgusting pigs, as I've called them, that seek to want to kill innocent people and take them hostage. These are horrible, horrible people, dangerous people with dangerous ideas. So yes, we need to think about that more. All of you out there who have just uttered, but what about the Palestinians? What about this? What about that? What about their plight? What about what they want? What about? And you haven't once called for the release of the hostages. There's something wrong. There is something wrong with your moral calculus. Thanks to everyone who stopped by. I think we'll end the live stream there. Really appreciate it. I wanted to try out a short live stream today to see who was around at this time of the day, and there was a few of you, which is great. Make sure you guys drop a like before you leave. I'd really appreciate that. And when we do publish this video, make sure you drop a comment under the video to let me know what you thought about it. But thank you all for who stopped by, and let art and science inspire.